I am not streaming this week because I'm on vacation with the family. We brought the kids to Walt Disney World. We're having a great time. We actually just got back and the kids are down for naps. We're doing a little bit of laundry. And so I'm just here chilling while everyone else is sleeping. And so I figured it was an appropriate time to talk about the elephant that is now in the room, which is Grand Theft Auto 6. And, you know, to talk about, I'm gonna step outside. No, you look at this, seamless transition, no load screens. Imagine that. We're gonna step outside so I don't wake up the kids with my loud ramblings. But I want to talk about this because I mean, let's just be real. The trailer looks ridiculous. Like the trailer looks insane. It's crazy. Every time we think that Rockstar maybe can't live up to the hype or expectations, they somehow do it. Like it absolutely is remarkable and crazy, but that's why people love Rockstar, because they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. So I wanted to talk about it just a tad because I think that Rockstar represents something really fascinating in the industry that, you know, everybody's aware of, but nobody else can really even begin to approach or to try to do. And that is attention to detail. The one thing that blew my mind more than anything else in that trailer, which I mean, of course, graphically, it's amazing. The sound design looks really good. Narratively, it's really interesting. But like most remarkably is the attention to detail across the board in everything they're doing. It's all crazy. Like even just a single shot where Jason is like walking out of a convenience store and he has a 6-pack of beer and like the liquid inside the bottles is sloshing with realistic physics as he's just walking out the door. I mean, if it was just a static water that doesn't sploosh or splosh, whatever the technical term is, I think everybody would have been okay with it. Everybody would have been like, yeah, it's a video game. I mean, I don't think anybody would have complained. And yet they go that extra mile and they take that extra step to do that. Or like little piles of trash in one part of the map look different than the piles of trash in the other part of the map that might be more sophisticated or higher income. But then the poorer areas, the trash looks different. Like it's that attention to detail that really sets them apart. And everybody is aware of this, and everybody is aware that gamers appreciate it, whether it's in Red Dead, GTA 5, or now GTA 6. But no other studio even begins to like attempt to mimic it. And I think it's just because it's really that difficult. Like it just really is that difficult to make a game on the scale of what you see with GTA 6 with that attention to detail. I mean, it's like the old saying, if it was easy, everybody would do it. And I think for a lot of studios, it's just like honestly that difficult. It's that unreasonably difficult and expensive and time consuming to think about those things and to work on that extra detail that it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense too, so they don't bother. And I can't really blame them because not many studios get a $1 billion budget to put something like this together. They don't get allowed to delay it, by 6 months or by a year. It's usually you get told your release date and you got to crank it out and figure it out, come hell or high water. So I think that's, what's really stood out to me. The trailer looks phenomenal graphically, beyond that. It's apparently captured, or apparently the whole trailer was captured on the PlayStation 5. They could have said PlayStation 5 Pro, but they didn't. They said PlayStation 5, which if that's the case, if it is actually running on a base PS5, that blows my mind even more. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Every aspect of this game is insane because they also posted some screenshots. I don't know if you've seen these, but on the website, you can actually go and see a bunch of specific and unique screenshots that they sent out, some little bitty animated bits, like little gameplay captures that are probably only like a quarter of a second long, but are part of the scrolling transition. But in one of these screenshots, there's one of Lucia where she's wearing these sunglasses and she's like in a pool, and you can see the full reflection of everything behind the camera in the reflection of the sunglasses. This is full ray tracing. I mean, most video games that are running on console use like some trickery to make it look, to get ray traced reflections without having to fully ray trace everything. Like for example, what Spider-Man Miles Morales did is they have all the glass buildings and glass, panes in the city as you're swinging around. And they wanted that to reflect realistically the other side of Miles that you can't see, like from where the player camera is. And so they would do quarter resolution ray tracing, where basically they would clump 4 pixels together and then ray trace that as a single pixel to save, you know, 75% of the compute power that would have otherwise been necessary. That can work, but it's really blurry and it's really just, you know, it works when you're swinging through a city. It works for Spider-Man Miles Morales. It doesn't really work when you're sitting and looking directly at sunglasses and then you see everything reflected realistically behind them. It's absolutely wild. And if this is actually running on base console hardware, it really is wild. I mean, I don't even know what to say. It's so far ahead of what anybody else is doing right now graphically. It's outrageous. It really is. But this is what Rockstar does, is they come along, they release a game, and for a decade, no one is even close to that level of fidelity. It's just what they do. And it seems like they're doing it again. And, you know, I think it also brings me back to the discussion we've had a lot on this channel and on my other channels, which is skepticism, healthy skepticism. Because I really do believe if you are a skeptic, you can save yourself from a lot of cons, you can save yourself from a lot of heartache, from a lot of lies, manipulation, if you're skeptical. But I think a lot of people mistake that or confuse it with cynicism. They think being skeptical is also like being intellectual, and that also means being cynical. And that's not what it means. Like, cynicism is when you're just throwing a fit because you can throw a fit. Like, cynicism is when you just look at something and you're like, nope, looks like crap. And if somebody asks you why, you can't really explain it. You're just, looks like crap. I don't like it. It sucks. Like, then you're just being a cynical a-hole. You know, then you're not doing anything. All skepticism really means is that you are not convinced of a proposition until there is sufficient evidence of that proposition to point you in that direction. Look at this, no load screens, once more. See? Todd, call me, I'll show you how it's done. But like, I think skepticism is really, really healthy, and everybody should be skeptical with things. But that also means acknowledging the evidence that is there when it is there. And in the case of Grand Theft Auto 6, people are like, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait. I think you're justified in being excited for GTA 6 because everything they've done for the last 20 years has been remarkable and has been incredible. And everything we're seeing so far for GTA 6 is also pointing in that direction. And that does sit on the scale of evidence. There's like reason to think that Grand Theft Auto 6 will be really, really good. Now, if this was coming from a brand new team out of like China and we have never heard of them before and they previously maybe worked on like some mobile games, then I would also, like, I'd be a little bit more skeptical and I'd be, okay, well, there's not all this evidence of their past track records and history and capabilities to factor in here. So let's maintain cautious optimism, but don't get too crazy. But when it comes to Rockstar, I mean, they have probably the best track record with single player games of anybody in the industry. I mean, it really is crazy what they've been able to do so consistently without really missing. Now, where they do historically miss is with games like Red Dead 2's online mode. That was a bit of a train wreck. And so, you know, it's not perfect, but that's why I think if you specify single player versus multiplayer, then you can be a little bit more nuanced with it. But all told, I mean, it absolutely blew my mind. The trailer looks incredible and phenomenal. It looks like it's going to be another masterclass. And if I were a studio that was looking at releasing in 2026, I would be sweating bullets right now because whew, you got some stiff competition. Absolutely crazy. But, you know, it's a good time to be a gamer. You know, we're eating well, we're eating good. And yeah, it's just very, very exciting. So apologies for no streams this week, but thank you for supporting me and the team, allowing me to go on a vacation like this with my family, making dreams come true, as it were. It's thanks to you guys, and never ever think I take that for granted. I truly, truly don't. And I'm sure Jacob and Trevor and the rest of the Luke Stevens team, we all, you know, equally appreciate you guys watching and supporting and making all of this possible. And who knows, maybe I do need to just go on more vacations so that more big news gets dropped the moment I leave. You never know. That's the last thing I need to do, is take more vacations. But truly, truly, thank you. We'll talk about this more on stream when I get back, I'm sure. But before I do that, I need to go and sit down at my little computer over there, and I need to film something real quick because I know something that you don't. I sure do. I sure do. Guess in the comment section below. Guess. You'll see it in a few days, I'm sure, but just guess. I wonder if any of you guys can figure out what I've got over there. I want to tell you so bad, but I can't. Okay, anyway, I love you guys. I'll see you soon. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye. He took my thing.
Why is everybody saying that the Oblivion remaster isn't well optimized? Probably just console peasants jealous that they'll never have the power that my glorious PC has. Old video game graphics, and particularly old 3D video game graphics, have fascinated me for a really long time because they consistently lie to your face and look great while doing it. While it's certainly convenient having the power of ray tracing at our disposal, which undeniably looks shadow-tastical, I think there's definitely been a drop in picture-perfect strategy when it comes to the visuals of modern video games, since we have the power now to load so many assets into one area. I mean, seriously, how are game developers supposed to cram an open 3D environment on a console that only had 128 kilobytes of RAM and 64 kilobytes of video memory? Oh, I hope Nvidia didn't hear that. The Super Nintendo was the first Nintendo console to feature 3D games, but the console couldn't actually handle 3D. The SNES had 7 graphics modes, and most of the console's 3D games utilized Mode 7. Mode 7 allowed a background layer to be scaled and rotated in a way that emulated true real-time 3D. Using this graphics technique, developers could put 2D sprites over the seemingly 3D environment to simulate a believable virtual landscape. In Super Mario Kart, Nintendo's sprite artists drew so many different angles of the characters so that they appeared natural while turning, or if they were being seen from an unconventional perspective. So even though the new 3D graphics thing was cool, it was incredibly time-consuming. So Miyamoto Mario Kart Nintendo said, "Gentlemen, the SNES can't run 3D, and it is costing us time that we could spend making actual 3D games. What we need is a new video game cartridge that is more powerful than our console's built-in processor." Star Fox was the first game to utilize the Super Effects chip, or as it was known by its code name, Mario. Mathematical, agronaut, rotation, and input-output. The Super Effects chip shot Nintendo right back into the innovation playing field because it allowed the SNES to load multiple 3D assets at one time while still utilizing the console's built-in 2D functions. Star Fox on the SNES is instantly recognizable because of the visual enhancements of the Super Effects chip. Enemies, buildings, allies, and certain props are all true 3D models, while the background and effects are two-dimensional. The background rotates and corrects itself based on where you are positioned, and to sell the innovation of true 3D even more, Agronaut designed the sound to change volume depending on how close you are to a sound source. Using the official SNES, I can show you guys how Nintendo and Agronaut utilized the SNES's layering system to create an authentic 3D environment. As we can see, they used the traditional Mode 7 graphics technique to render the two-dimensional background that, as I stated earlier, adjusts itself to the player's position. Another layer was used for the HUD, and last but definitely not least, the Super Effects chip's 3D models and effects are resigned in its own layer as well. When I first learned about Star Fox's very interesting development, my first thought was, is this the same Nintendo that I know? But to clear the air, it is in fact the same Nintendo we all know and love, because the innovative 3D technology stuff was done by Agronaut, while Nintendo was responsible for the plot and general design of Star Fox. So moral of the story, Nintendo will never change.
本当に剣と盾を持っているという意味、右手を振れば、so you just shake your right.
But speaking of Nintendo, I think now's the perfect time to talk about their 3D-oriented console, the Nintendo 64, and specifically the most graphically demanding game on it, Skyrim. Perfect Dark was a first-person shooter developed by Rare, and one of the 28 M for Mature 17+ games released on the system. It's also one of those games that was so ahead of its time, it resulted in half the employees leaving the studio after development because of burnout, and in kind of a f***ed up way, just screams good media. It's common for video games at the end of a console's lifespan to stretch the capabilities of what the system can handle, and Perfect Dark is an excellent example of that. The first level takes place on the top few stories of a skyscraper in the middle of a dystopian city. Throughout the level, the inaccessible exterior remains loaded in, so you can still see the skyscrapers from really far away. The N64 is only able to handle this because the skyscrapers are textures placed perpendicular to each other, so from where the player is allowed to explore, they appear as full-fledged buildings. Unlike its spiritual predecessor, GoldenEye 007, the game features a more advanced lighting system that adjusts where certain areas lighten up and go dark depending on what's happening, like if a gun is being fired or if there's a light nearby. Perfect Dark also handled exterior rendering in a strategically optimized way by allowing transparency on windows only when the player was a couple feet away. If the player goes too far, the windows become dark and turn into a texture that moves depending on where the player sets the camera. Interestingly enough, physically moving doesn't affect the texture, only the camera does. While it looks like a big black dump because I'm playing at 1440p, at the intended 480i resolution, the effect still looks like dog dog shit I can't even lie. The reason that this game was able to accomplish so much on the Nintendo 64 was because it pretty much required the expansion pack for the console, which added an extra 4 megabytes of RAM to the console's base 4 megabytes. Like I said before though, on a scale of Valve to Rockstar, Perfect Dark's development was definitely more Rockstar, so a lot of content ended up getting cut from the final product. The multiplayer mode, which surprisingly enough still holds up well today, originally had a feature where you could take a picture of someone's face with the Game Boy camera and upload it to the game to slap on the models of the multiplayer characters. After Rare realized they would have absolutely no control over who somebody decided to use as a face to shoot at, they cut it out and still to this day believe it was the right decision. I don't think it was the right decision. But that doesn't mean it wasn't still impressive by 2000 game standards. Windows could be smashed, couches could be moved, people would dynamically speak with the player. In the last year of development, the studio acquired tech for motion capture which was used for a variety of the animations, and in some cases, the limitations of the N64 actually helped the game visually. For example, the reflections in the game are just copies of the same room upside down under a transparent texture, but it's so sharp and natural looking that you could say it looks better than a lot of screen space reflections we see in video games today. That said, kind of unfair to compare the two since modern games are reflecting a whole lot more than a couch and a couple walls, but still, when you think of old video games in terms of optimization, your mind probably immediately goes to Silent Hill 1. Everybody knows that Team Silent used fog to cover up the distances that the PlayStation 1 couldn't load, and even today some games use fog to hide pop-in. But some games did so much in terms of post-effects that it not only covered up hardware limitations, but actually made the game look better. Shadow of the Colossus was one of the last PlayStation 2 oriented games to come out before the 7th gen takeover. And it also, no offense to my Shadow of the Colossus stance, has the most rage-inducing horse since Roach from The Witcher 3. In Shadow of the Colossus, you're tasked to navigate a variety of dramatically open areas in hopes of hunting down all of the Colossi. Because Shadow of the Colossus is a lot of landscape, the developers used clever tricks to amp up the cinematicness of each area and distract the player from the PlayStation 2 fucking dying trying to run it. The developers incorporated a built-in HDR technique that simulated light in a way that it would appear as if a camera was picking up on it. In dark enclosed spaces, the outside areas shine so bright that you can't see the spaces that aren't loaded in correctly. And when riding aggro, the brightness shifts from very light to very dark depending on where you go on the map. Shadow of the Colossus' art direction makes the game screenshot material at all times. Most areas consist of an impressive amount of space, with large rock faces decorating the horizon. While it may seem like loading extreme distances like this would be impossible on the PlayStation 2, you'd be completely right. There are multiple different loading stages that the distant areas go through depending on how far the player is from them. At the farthest distance, the game renders them in 2D, similar to how most out-of-bounds areas were done on the Nintendo 64. And notice how the developers used fog and lighting to obscure the distance, making the two-dimensional formation less identifiable as true 2D. If the player ventures closer to the cliff faces, they shift to a low poly model, and then of course a more detailed one when up close. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is another example of a game that used its art direction to cover up blatant hardware limitations. The islands that the players can see in the distance are extremely low poly, but they're tinted a dark blue that contrasts nicely over the bright ocean. What's interesting is the islands on the horizon can only be rendered so far away. Most of them sit the exact same distance away from Link, because the engine could only load so much space at a time. When on an island, the ocean surrounding it is usually this peaceful blue instead of the distorted wavy texture that's seen far out in the ocean, because 1, it looks more natural, and 2, it saves performance because it allows more detail to be focused on the island Link's on and not the big empty ocean surrounding it. I'd argue the only thing holding Wind Waker back from a modern perspective is the fact that its old-ass code hardlocks it to 30 frames per second. Otherwise, a lot of the graphical tricks that's present in the game would go right over the player's head just because it's consistent with the art style. In Shadow of the Colossus, shadows are also rendered very sparingly across the landscape, but the player wouldn't even notice because the gloomy design of the game makes the lack of darkness and shadows in the scenery believable. capable. Shadows were instead focused almost entirely on the player, aggro, and the colossi. The game had separate shadow map models that the developers would use to accurately texture where a shadow would appear on each important model, and because of the amount of detail they spared just so it could be used on the main character, Shadow of the Colossus is one of the few PS2 games to use real-time shadows on player characters. Some of you guys may be thinking, Justin, you are an idiot, go back to Pizza Hut and get off YouTube. What are you talking about? Players won't notice the 2D rock faces in the distance. Are you blind? The resolution and frame rate that I'm playing the game at on this video was not the resolution or frame rate standard at the time. The normal PlayStation 2 Classic version of the game plays at 480p, and at that resolution, the graphics appear way more realistic. You wouldn't even notice the flaws in the environment. That's why all of those realistic indie games have this body cam filter over it, because the distortion makes it look more real. But to be honest, 99% of you probably already knew that. What I really want to talk about is the fur in Shadow of the Colossus and how the developers made it look so good on the ancient PlayStation 2 hardware. On the raw stripped down vertex model of the Colossi, the developers painted shadows where there would be real-time ambient occlusion in a modern video game, and the fur is colored a light greenish brown to act as a foundation for the final version. The fur on the Colossus was made in a very convenient way where it looked great but wasn't too demanding on the PS2's GPU. For the long sections of fur on a Colossus's back, for example, the developers used 4 to 8 polygon layers, but 6 was the common number depending on the boss. The layers on top were lighter, while the ones closest to the Colossus were darker. The texture of the fur is 64 by 64 pixels, and each layer uses the same texture but just changes the brightness to give a feeling of depth. And some parts of the textures are transparent, making the strands of fur look individual. Now, to be fair, I broke this process down into very simple terms for the sake of entertainment, but basically, the fur technique in Shadow of the Colossus isn't anywhere close to individually rendered strands of hair, but it doesn't have to be because it looks amazing but also saves performance. And fun fact, they use the same technique on the grass too. Keep in mind, sorry about the hair, I just got back from a walk. It's
Kinda shitty outside, it was raining.
Keep in mind, this game ran on the same console that could only play Silent Hill 2 at 25 frames per second. The big lesson about today's video is that a lot of the time with video games, it's less about the console and more about the optimization of the product. Without stylization, Silent Hill 2 wasn't exactly Crysis when it came to graphics. Because of Silent Hill 2's gloomy atmosphere, Team Silent didn't have any pressure to decorate the world with a bunch of shadows, just like what we talked about with Shadow of the Colossus. The game does use real-time shadows in minimal amounts, and we can see this in the room where you get the flashlight. Using a free camera hack, we can see the other side of James that isn't hit by the light, and his model reacts appropriately to this scene. Real-time lighting is also used in the hallways, but it's very clear to see when it starts and when it cuts off. Another blatant performance saver with the real-time light is how smaller objects don't cast shadows. Where Silent Hill 2's optimization falls flat is how it renders off-screen objects. Using the free camera hack from before, we can see the objects in the fog that weren't previously visible. For some reason, the game renders them in full detail instead of loading lower res or even 2D models to save performance. Silent Hill 2's models were also pretty high quality for the time. And it's not just the models. Light sources and shadows are visible too, even though the player can't even see them. Something Silent Hill 2 does well though is how much it fakes its shadows. Pretty much every stationary model in the game is painted dark around the edges where it touches another object. This is a lighting technique in video games that's as old as time, and even though it's inaccurate, I really hope developers keep using it. The Last of Us Part 1 and 2 are great examples of modern games that use excessive ambient occlusion to its advantage. The darkness around the high quality models makes the brighter spots stand out and makes each area seem more detailed. Wind Waker from 2003 also used inaccurate lighting to its advantage, like how only one light source can affect Link at one time. Nintendo didn't even design the graphics like that because of a GameCube hardware limitation. The GameCube can handle up to 8 light sources at one time. They only did it because it made Link stand out more to the player. And in older consoles like the PlayStation 2, developers really had to choose between accuracy or what looks good. I will say that the opening scene for Silent Hill 2 is optimized pretty well. The developers made sure to tweak it so nothing unnecessary was loaded in, and that's probably because of the open space with the 2D background in the distance. Only what's necessary is loaded in, and we can test this by flipping the camera around, revealing that most of the models are only half loaded. But what if I told you that only 2 years after Shadow of the Colossus, a game would come out that threw the idea of working around real-time graphics right out the window and into a KPA soldier's face? Can it run Crysis? Is a saying that we've all heard because back in 2007 when the game released, it was so advanced that the large majority of people could not run the game at a playable frame rate. Almost everything in Crysis is real-time and is meant to stretch your computer's simulation capabilities to their absolute limit. Throwing a grenade into a building will result in it caving in into itself in a way that reacts accurately to whatever whatever materials are holding it up. Trees can be broken up into individual parts, you can pick up almost everything and throw it at an enemy. This game is so advanced that I thought my computer was struggling to run it because it was so ahead of its time, but actually, Crysis was built for single-core CPUs, and probably what happened was while developing the game, the creators assumed single-core processors would just get more powerful, but what actually ended up happening was CPU manufacturers just kept adding cores into processors, so Crysis still only uses one core to run. Which is why no matter how good your PC is, it probably can't run Crysis, or at least not consistently well. Of course, not everything in Crysis has proper physics, because it was still a game from 2007, but because of its use of pretty much every single modern visual achievement at the time, from screen space reflections to material physics to shadow mapping on environmental and human objects, Crysis was in some ways the end of an era. It's not that developers don't incorporate graphical tricks in their games to showcase beautiful visuals without using as much power anymore, but designing visuals just isn't as tight as it used to be. A lot of iconic games are remembered for their art style, but most of the time they got that beloved art style because they were working around hardware limitations. So does this mean that new video games are facing a decline in original art direction since there's not nearly as many boundaries as there used to be? No! Shut the f. Plenty of AAA games with fun and original art styles come out every single year, and although there's certainly a collection of bad apples releasing junk that doesn't work on launch, those companies have been pumping out slop since 2002 anyways. I don't want this video to become another circle jerk of negativity dogging on modern gaming like the other one. Sometimes I regret posting that video to the internet because even though I did address a lot of problems with the current era of tech and graphics, there's still a ton of value and beauty in modern gaming that I didn't talk about enough to balance out the criticism. In the last few years, it's become the new thing to dislike video game graphics. Because hot take, I actually prefer gameplay over graphics. And so do you. And so does Cletus next door. I see the same opinion posted everywhere, as if it's this rebellious assertion of individuality, even though it's about as hot a take as saying, boy, do I love clean air, but I don't like breathing in my own carbon monoxide. So I'm gonna take this moment with you guys to appreciate how far graphics have come. Red Dead Redemption 2 always felt like a painting to me. Some people say realistic games don't have style, but Red Dead 2's exaggerated western lights beg to differ. This game is so dramatic, and I love it. Night City is the most depressing place on Earth, but probably one of the best game cities to spend 100 hours in. Only in Cyberpunk do I look at garbage and say, damn, that looks amazing. Mario Maker is a really good game. I just wanted to throw that in there while I was at it. But what do you guys think about all this? What older game do you think looked really good for its time? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll check them out as soon as I possibly can. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this video, and make sure to have the best one ever!
A drunk driving lawyer.
Today we've got a momentous story that's flown under the radar. It's the end of one of the largest dramas in gaming over the last while, and it is the Unity runtime fee. Now, the TLDR in this story is Unity revealed new pricing that would totally change their business model and pull the rug out from under loads of developers, where basically beyond a revenue and an installation threshold, devs would have to pay for every single installation, even if it was just the same customer downloading it twice. This whole thing exploded in their face, but now, a year later, the fee has just been killed. Unity has got a new plan, heads have rolled, and if you'd like to be a developer, check out today's sponsor, who will teach you real skills, and they're ones I know are high impact because it's what I majored in. boot.dev/Bellether News will teach you back-end development using Python and Go, and they will solve the worst pitfall of learning programming, which is bouncing from tutorial to tutorial, each done by different people with different coding styles and not on complete projects. Boot is a complete, extensive learning path made by back-end devs who love video games, and that's why they've got community raid bosses, XP quests, leaderboards, and they've built a killer Discord community. And now is actually a perfect time to get started. That's because they've just posted a 7-hour walkthrough of their Python course. That's the first thing you'll be hitting up, and it's a foundational skill. You see, with programming languages, like, they're not hard to learn after you've learned your first, because it's all the same concepts and logic. So this is the perfect start, and you can get 25% off your first purchase with code BellyLearNews. You'll be hopping into fun game concept inspired problems that basically are leveraging what you already understand to help the concept click. Now, Boot run a no questions asked 30-day money back guarantee. They've got free demos for all of their courses, and they are super consumer friendly. And you can hit up boot.dev/BellyLearNews, where you'll get 25% off your first purchase, and they'll take care of you with the rest. The real story is that Unity was in trouble long before the runtime fee thing even happened. It's a pretty crazy downward spiral, and it all obviously starts with the company itself in 2004, where the thing is, it had actually never been profitable. Now, this is something we see in loads of different companies. The idea is you build technology, you capture the market, and the whole unit economics problem, well, you just sort of solve that a bit later. Now, fast forward to 2020, and they go public. That generates a hell of a lot of cash, and of course, because they're public, that means we get public filings and things like that. Now, in the earlier days of Unity, most of us thought Unity, and what came to mind was basically indie games and asset flips. But for Unity, where the real action was mobile. Because in a way, Unity became an ads platform. That's actually how they earned the majority of their money. And as they grew, they acquired more and more and more. And some of it was great, like acquiring Mechanim and City Machine, which developers loved. Others, though, well, those were just to serve their advertisements business. And that takes us to when they go public. Going public gave them a war chest, and they were hungry. So Unity acquired 10 companies from 2020 to 2023, and they gave us great insight, right? Most were related to their core work. There was others like Parsec, which is a remote desktop service, and Weta Digital. And what we saw is enterprise becoming more of a focus. Part of that's because over in Tim Sweeney's land of the Unreal Engine, well, you were seeing film productions using Unreal and them unlocking this new enterprise market. They obviously wanted some of that, so they tried to go hard towards that market. And for devs, this time kinda sucked, especially if you were, say, a premium indie developer. Unity had essentially lost interest in Unity, the game engine. Now it was Unity, the business, which doesn't actually make money from you making a game. And so we saw Unity moving to enterprise, moving to virtual productions, trying to do more advertising stuff. And if you were a developer for, say, premium indie games, that absolutely sucked, because the premium indie games just were not the focus. Unity lost interest in Unity, and it gained interest in Unity, the wider business that sells ads and does all of that stuff. And nothing made it more clear than Iron Source. And this is what started to change things in a deep way. And you know the way sometimes a merger happens with a company, but the company doing the buying almost seems to lose relative power. I know in the aviation space, people talk about Boeing's merger with McDonnell Douglas and how that ended up going. Well, this feels like one of those. So who are Iron Source? Well, Iron Source makes advertising and monetization tools that some allege to be so invasive in their tracking and everything they do that they're essentially malware, though obviously Iron Source of course deny that. What happened is Iron Source and Unity merged in 2022, with the Iron Source owners controlling over a quarter of the combined board, with the existing Unity shareholders having their stake reduced. Suffice to say, Unity devs were getting the willies. If you suspected that Unity was not interested in their core game engine, the clues were about to come in thick and fast of a game engine company transforming into an advertisement platform. And if you aren't quite sure, this statement from then CEO, of course, of Electronic Arts fame, John Riccitiello, sure didn't help matters. I'm going to read it verbatim. Ferrari and some of the other high-end car manufacturers still use clay and carving knives. It's a very small portion of the gaming industry that works that way, and some of these people are my favorite people in the world to fight with, because they're beautiful and pure, brilliant people. But they're also some of the biggest fucking idiots. Suffice to say, that didn't help matters. Now, those of us who are interested in making proper, not cash extraction Skinner box games knew that Unity did not care. It's driven by money, he just said where the money comes from. Any shred of trust was gone. But even if his point was, oh, indie devs, you lovable rogues making art instead of money, you're silly, but I respect you. Even if that's his point, the actions of his company were clearly not aligned. We then had further layoff rounds that targeted Unity's own developers. That did not help. And then, amid all of that chaos, the runtime fee. let me break it down. If Unity were like Adobe, they could just make money by selling subscriptions, and they do sell subscriptions to their game engine. I think the problem is there's so many people you can sell Creative Cloud to, and comparatively less for something like Unity. And that meant that their subscriptions were not making them profitable. That's why they expanded their lines of business via acquisitions, focusing on ads, diversifying with the acquisition of Weta Digital to try and tap into that film market. This was all because their core product was never profitable. Even games to the scale of City Skylines, Pillars of Eternity, or Hearthstone did not generate enough money. What did generate money was mobile game ads. And that could even be a problem because Hearthstone may get many downloads, and yes, it was made in Unity. Pokemon Go, Among Us, they'll get many downloads, but they're not advertised via ads. So what if, instead of just advertisements, they got money every time a Unity game was installed? That's what this fee was all about, an attempt to find profit with their core product, which was large-scale, volume, free-to-play mobile games, not all of which are fully using the Unity ads platform. This would be retroactive, it would be sweeping, and it would definitely work. It would save Unity, jack up the stock price, and make everyone happy. So thought the board. The board were obviously wrong. Everyone revolted. Pent-up anger from traditional devs, who actually would not be impacted that much, finally had an escape because they were already pissed. They already felt betrayed. They felt like Unity did not care about them. And with this, it just proved the sorts of things Unity would do, that they would not be a stable partner. Mobile developers, though, they had their entire business model surprise changed, a total rug pull. Some even disabled their monetization in protest, and Unity, in fact, announced this whole thing so fast that they didn't have a proper FAQ for it. And worse, bits of it made no sense. How would Unity track installs? Does every game like phone home to a server? Apparently it wouldn't, but Unity said that they had, techniques. It was very much a trust me bro thing, but when it comes to how much I'm being billed, trust me bro is absolutely not good enough. But then the crazy thing happened, general audience mass outcry, and to so many of us in gaming, that was honestly kinda strange, not exactly expected. It's not a problem that would directly impact consumers, and for real, a lot of the people who would be impacted are playing mobile games. But I think the point was the principle and the big idea that Unity, the thing that powers so many of the indie games that we love, that they were just being bastards. That was enough. Articles, videos, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views. I think actually some of the largest videos on our channel were about this. It was a true PR disaster, and within 2 weeks, they swapped it back and announced a new system. It basically would roll back the worst, and it gave developers an option. On the one hand, a runtime fee, on the other hand, a flat rate, whichever you preferred. But that's not all that would happen. Then heads would roll. CEO John Riccitiello fell on his sword in October, quickly being replaced by an ex-IBM president and Delta Airways man, Jim Whitehurst. Then November saw another cut. 3.8% of staff, 14 offices closed, and Weta being axed. But January was the rough one. And if you don't remember, January was an insane month for the industry. We had over like 10,000 layoffs. A lot of them were from Unity, who axed 25% of their workforce. That was brutal. It was a true gutting, though it is one that the market liked. But that's not the full picture. The most important thing went completely under the radar, and it's this. 6 founders of ironSource, who of course had gained massive power over Unity, they would leave over 6 months, with the main guy leaving his role internally but staying on the board. From the outside, it looked like the reign of an ironSource stacked board that almost killed Unity in their pursuit to basically expand beyond game development. Well, that essentially failed. What we would get instead is a new Unity that is more centralized, that does less, and that sticks to its strengths, taking less risk. And that's what brings us to the present and the complete death of the runtime fee, even as an option. If you go to the Unity website right now, you get a banner at the very top, and that banner reads, "The runtime fee is cancelled. We're updating Unity plans." Yeah, it's gone. The updated plans are a little bit more expensive, so here's how it works. Personal is free, and you can make up to 200 grand with no fee and no splash screen. So if you're just a solo indie, that is absolutely awesome. Where it changes though is Pro and Enterprise. So if you make over 200 grand a year, you gotta be on Pro. That's got an 8% price hike to $2,200 a year. But where it really will kick in is Enterprise, where it's a 25% price hike for those making over 25 million a year. But they'll still respect any bespoke deals that they've made. And the whole point there is Enterprise clients will generally have, more like 100, 200 Unity seats. But Unity will say, well, look, if you're making over 25 mil, you can afford it. And it's funny seeing this happen in business because it reminds me of Diablo 4. I know that seems insane, but you know the way sometimes a game will have a new version that just reinvents the wheel, but then over patches and expansions, they basically just end up back where they started with the previous version. I think that is absolutely the energy that we're seeing here. Here's a quote from what they said, and I think this bit matters for developer confidence. From this point forward, it's our intention to revert to a more traditional cycle, considering any potential price increases only on an annual basis. Our commitment remains that if we change the editor software terms in ways that impact you, you may continue your current version of the software under the previously agreed terms as long as you keep using that version. That is good. I mean, in a way, it's a commitment to not being money-grubbing crackheads, but it's definitely what we want to see. The free funnel is there. Pro is expensive, but only when you're earning money. And if you're an enterprise, grats, you're an enterprise. And what we are left with is them doing this, but they're doing it in a timed way. And that's because in just a few days, Unite happens. That's their big keynote speech. I've got a feeling that this is the first bit of news they want, and they're going to radically try to represent themselves as being friends of the industry, friends of developers, essentially trying to fix their brand image after what has been a brutal year. Again, 25% staff cut. And where we as customers are left is basically a Unity that hopefully will be more focused. But we've also seen massive growth in the Godot engine. That's fairly interesting. I mean, hell, Bracky's, a legend of game development tutorials, he's come back to YouTube after basically quitting, and he's came back to do Godot tutorials. And of course, over in the land, the realm of the invincible Tim Sweeney, Unreal is continuing to be a powerhouse. Better still, the people who got Unity in this mess are gone, as are many of their staff, and that's the painful bit. This is then a cautionary tale for how to run a business. Unity did not have a sustainable model, but they saw real potential with advertisement. They took on more money, they made a damaging merger that kind of strayed them away from their mission, they lost control of themselves, and they speedran themselves into the ground. It was a waste. This has been a year of massive pain and multiple years of meandering, losses of faith from developers, all to get back to where we started. And it's not the only cautionary tale of going public that we've had either. Check out this video next, diving into Activision Blizzard, what's going on there, the cuts that Microsoft are doing, and the context in which those cuts are happening. I think you'll enjoy it.
On the 17th of February 2004, a 68-year-old man went to withdraw money from an ATM at a Just Go shopping center in Yokkaichi City, Mie Prefecture. This simple, routine action, however, would ultimately end with his tragic death. This is the true, unsolved mystery of the Just Go ATM phantom. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Japanese store brands, Just Go, before being renamed to Aeon, were large shopping centers. They usually contained grocery stores, clothing stores, 100-yen shops, and restaurants. Unlike most of these types of establishments, there were ATM corners available for shoppers so that they could withdraw cash. One day, an elderly gentleman, both hands occupied with shopping bags, went to withdraw money from an ATM at the Yokkaichi City Just Go. But he wasn't alone. Loitering around the ATM corner was a young woman, cradling a baby in a chest harness. She'd been lingering in the area for roughly 5 minutes before the man showed up, and had been keeping an eye on the place. As the man began to leave the ATM area after withdrawing his money, the woman approached him. She acted as though she intended to walk past, before purposely bumping into his shoulder. As the man stood, shocked and confused, the woman ran her hands over his body until she found his wallet, filled with the recently withdrawn money and cards. The man and woman wrestled over it. When she was unsuccessful in taking it from him, she grabbed the man's arm and collar and screamed, "Thief!" drawing the attention of the people around her. 3 nearby shoppers and store clerks, seeing a man tussling over a wallet with a young woman holding a baby, decided that the man must be the criminal and apprehended him, allowing the woman to break free. The man fought so hard against the woman and his attackers that 3 of his plastic cash cards were crushed in his hand. They tackled him to the floor and called the police. By chance, 2 young, inexperienced police officers who were arresting a shoplifter nearby were already at the scene to provide assistance. They handcuffed the man and forced him to lie down on the ground, despite his protests and pleas of innocence. That was when they noticed. The woman had disappeared. The man was pressed to the floor with a policeman on top of him for 20 minutes, despite his advanced age. When he tried to rise up from the ground, the police forced him back down. Eyewitnesses at the scene said that one policeman was so aggressive he broke a lens of the victim's glasses and caused him to groan in a very unusual way. He soon began vomiting and lost consciousness, but the 25-year-old policeman who arrested him refused to uncuff him or even take notice of his dire circumstances. When more police came onto the scene and saw the handling of the situation, they finally uncuffed him and called an ambulance. But by that time it was too late. The dangerously high blood pressure caused by the stress of the situation and subsequent police brutality caused arrhythmia and heart failure. His brain shut down and he died the next day. The day after his death, without testimony from the mysterious woman or any true evidence, the police unashamedly filed charges against the deceased victim. Fortunately, some within the police force became suspicious about the woman. They investigated the CCTV footage at the ATM corner and determined that the man was completely innocent. In 2005, 1 year after the incident, they released 2 images of the woman taken from the CCTV footage to the public. Not since the infamous Glico case has this been done in Japan. The images were of low quality, and due to the almost inhumane facial features, the public began calling the woman a monster or phantom. Of course, releasing the images 1 year after the incident happened meant that the likelihood of finding the woman or any evidence was significantly reduced. At the time of the crime, the woman was estimated to be aged between 25 and 30 years old, and the baby she was carrying on her chest was between 2 and 3 years old. She was thought to be Japanese, 155 to 160 centimeters tall, to have shoulder-length brown hair, and have a face that was described as unusual. In fact, many have commented online that her face doesn't even look human. She was wearing dark clothes during the incident, and despite touching the man's cash cards, left no fingerprints at the scene. Other than screaming "thief" at the victim, she didn't say anything to anyone. Strangely, she wasn't caught on any other CCTV at the exits of the Just Go shopping center. It was as if she vanished into thin air. Even after seeing the CCTV footage, it was only in March 2011, 7 years after the incident, that the police finally formally acknowledged that the man was not a criminal. Therefore, since his death, his reputation was stained with a false charge, which is much more serious in Japan than it is in the West. The date is also significant because it was just 1 month after the statute of limitations passed for the theft. In other words, they would not investigate the case any further and would not try to find the woman responsible. The bereaved family took the police to court for their unprofessionalism. The police recognized that a mistake was made, but claimed that excessive force was not used. They even went as far as to say that the arrest of the man did not cause his death. The family was originally paid a measly $125 compensation for the death in May 2011. However, the Nagoya High Court ordered the police to pay $350,000 for, to put it mildly, errors on the side of the police. Despite the circumstances of the incident, the authorities have never publicly apologized to the family. As for the Phantom Woman, she was never seen again. The police never actively tried to find her, other than releasing the images and printing some posters to be placed in the local area. They never got the images professionally edited or made illustrations based on eyewitness accounts, which is very standard practice for Japanese police. Unfortunately, unless she comes forward herself, I doubt she will ever be found. Thank you for watching my second YouTube video. If you haven't already, check out the other video I made about the mysterious SOS sign found in Hokkaido. Until next time, goodbye. This harrowing voice is the last known recordings of a dead man, found on a tape recorder in the picturesque mountains of Hokkaido, northern Japan. This is the story of the mysterious SOS incident. In the afternoon of July 24th, 1989, a Ginrei helicopter of the Hokkaido Police Force was circling the skies around the Taisetsuzan volcanic group, searching for 2 Tokyo hikers who went missing. During their aerial search, they hovered over a clearing after they spotted something rather odd. Off the hiking trail on the south side of the mountain near a river, a large SOS sign made from logs of white birch trees was discovered. Bewildered by the sighting, the helicopter pilots noted the location and continued their search before fortunately finding and rescuing the 2 missing hikers approximately 3 kilometers away. This, however, was only the beginning of the mystery. After the missing hikers were picked up, the Japanese police interviewed them and made a startling discovery. After asking about the SOS sign, the 2 of them replied with, "We don't know anything about that." The horrible realization set in. Someone else was missing on the mountain and in trouble. The next day, the morning of July 25th, 1989, the police helicopter once again went into the skies above Taisetsuzan, but this time it landed officers to conduct a search of the area around the SOS sign. What they found was what they feared most: human remains. Scattered around the site were fragments of human bones that showed signs of animal bites. No flesh was found, showing that the bones had been there for a long time. But surprisingly, this wasn't the strangest thing they discovered. Around 100 meters away from the site was a discarded knapsack. Inside it, among many ordinary personal items, was a tape recorder with 4 tapes. On one of the tapes was the chilling voice of a young man screaming for help, the very voice you heard at the beginning of this video. But this tape left more questions than answers. Let's listen again. First of all, why did the man speak this way? He is screaming each syllable at the top of his lungs. But why? The police have theorized that he was trying to call out to a helicopter which occasionally flew overhead, and the tape recorder turned on by itself. This theory is backed up by the line in the recording where he asked to be pulled up by helicopter from his current location. They believe that he would have moved around, swinging his arms in the air to get the pilot's attention, which could have inadvertently turned the recorder on. Saying each syllable like he did also would have made his voice easier for people to hear over the sounds of the helicopter blades. Another theory brought forward by the police was that he recorded his voice in this way purposely, because screaming over and over it would soon wear out his voice. The strange way of speaking would leave an impression on any who heard it, so they would come to investigate. Unfortunately, these are only theories, and the reason why the man did this will never be known. By now you're probably wondering who this man was. The items found around the SOS sign give us an idea of his personality, as well as his identification. I previously mentioned that 4 tapes were found, including the recording of a man screaming for help. On the other tapes were recordings of anime theme songs, including those from popular 1980s shows such as Super Dimension Fortress Macross and Magic Princess Minky Momo. Coupled with the anime illustrations on the tape cases, this allowed police to suspect that the person was a big anime fan, or otaku. Further fueling this victim profile was that, in an episode of the world-famous manga and anime Astro Boy, an SOS sign is made using branches from a tree, the exact same method used in this very real case. As for his identity, personal identification found at the site, as well as analysis from bone fragments, identified the man as a 25-year-old company worker from Kornanshi City in Aichi Prefecture. In July 1984, 5 years before the discovery of the sign, he traveled to the area to do some hiking. After checking into a hotel near the mountain, he left his luggage and said to the employee, "I'm going for a hike." After he failed to return that evening, employees made a report to the local police and a search was conducted, but he was never found or seen again. The helicopter was deployed during the search, but because of the high cost of using it, it was only in the air for a very short amount of time. It is theorized that the man saw the helicopter in the sky and made the SOS sign in the hope that it would be spotted. There are 2 things about this sign that have stood out to police since the beginning. First of all, the sign itself. From the voice recording, we know that the man was in trouble and unable to move from his location. So how was he able to make the sign? Each letter was 5 meters tall and 2 to 3 centimeters across, and the birch logs used in its construction were very heavy. According to police investigating the case, it would take a lot of physical strength to move such logs. In fact, the person would need to be stronger than the average man to be able to build the sign all by themselves. If this man had such strength left, why did he not try to find rescue? There were popular hiking trails nearby where he could have walked to, so why stay behind and waste energy and time building a huge sign? If he was injured, how was he capable of creating a large sign that even a healthy person would struggle to build? Second, the recording itself. There is one line that sticks out to police. I can't get down from the cliff. The sign and location of the tape recorder were found in some relatively flat wetland, a few kilometers away from any cliffs that would prove to be difficult to descend. So what does this mean? Was the tape recorded in a different place? Did he manage to climb down from a cliff and descend the mountain until he was unable to carry on? Was he confused and gave inaccurate information? Or was this whole thing an elaborate plan to cover up foul play and throw police off with a red herring? We will never know the answers to these questions. The only theory that makes a little bit of sense is the two boulders theory. Along the hiking trail up the mountain is an almost perfectly square boulder nicknamed the Safe due to its unusual shape. It is used as a landmark to lead people down the mountain towards town. Nearby, however, is another square boulder nicknamed the Fake Safe. This boulder is near a trail that leads back around the mountain to a steep, treacherous area. It is very easy to mistake the fake safe for the real one, especially when the mountain gets foggy or it has been raining. Could the steep, cliff-like area it leads to have been the cliff he was referring to in his recording? Again, we will never know. I can't help but feel sad for this man. I wonder what he felt all alone in a strange place, what was going through his mind during his final moments. While many questions will forever remain unanswered, I am at least glad that his eventual fate is known and his family can get closure. One of the biggest lessons we can learn from this story is to never underestimate nature. If you plan to go hiking in an area you're not familiar with, plan thoroughly and go with a friend, because that lovely scenic hike you take could easily become your last. Thank you for watching my first YouTube video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment to let me know what you thought. Also, if you're interested in learning more about strange stories and unsolved mysteries from Japan, please subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.
engaged in a lawsuit right now that I find extremely interesting. And I tickled it a little bit last night on stream, but I want to get into the actual spaghetti and meatballs today. Now, obviously, this isn't Bungie's first rodeo with lawsuits. They've been involved in a couple high-profile ones I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, but I wouldn't necessarily call them seasoned veterans, that this is just, you know, business as usual. Not like Nintendo, who has more lawsuits than Elon Musk does children. Bungie has few and far between lawsuits, but most of you hear about them, such as like their big one not long ago where they actually had a huge victory over cheat makers, which I think was great. Their current battle, though, has got them fucking stun-locked here. They are being sued by a writer who claims that Destiny stole his story for their campaign for Red War and Curse of Osiris. And Bungie is having a very difficult time defending themselves here. They can't actually produce the content to prove that they didn't steal from him. Thus, the lawsuit is still ongoing, and they're kind of getting embarrassed because of one simple thing that they have become so accustomed to doing. It's become like a fucking addiction. Sunsetting content. If you've played Destiny, you're familiar with this, and it's not just Destiny. Other games also take content out of the game over time. But Destiny takes entire paid things that you bought with your own clams, will take it out of the game and vault it. Now we're going to do like a full dive in here, like an actual colonoscopy on this case with everything we know right now, but I just want to give you the gist here. One of the things they vaulted is the entirety of the campaign for Destiny 2 when you first bought the game, Red War. I have bitched about that for the longest time now, that the campaign you bought when this game came out is no longer in the game at all and is completely inaccessible to the players. I think that is an unbelievably ridiculous concept, but I'm not going to just rant and rave about that like a lunatic again. But the community had always been under the impression that when content like Red War is vaulted, Bungie themselves can still access it. Like, they haven't just, you know, poofed it out of existence like some kind of fairy godparents took care of it. They haven't just erased it from the corporeal realm. But it turns out that is the case. Bungie has openly admitted they also can't access the content anymore in this lawsuit. They actually can't even get their paws on it either, thus they can't really defend their claims of innocence against the copyright claims. It's a mess. Like, they actually have just banished it to the fucking shadow realm here. Anyway, the lawsuit was started by a writer named Matthew Kelsey Martineau, and he worked under the pseudonym Casper Cole, and he published a story on his blog that he claims was stolen by Bungie for the Red War and Curse of Osiris story elements. Most notably, Red Legion, he's saying, was taken directly from his writings. Other shared elements mentioned between Red War and the DLC Curse of Osiris are things like celestial object hovering over Earth, war beasts, and more. From what I can find, Casper Cole had this published on his WordPress in 2013, 2014-ish, and this lawsuit was filed last year. Guessing he's not a big first-person shooter fan, must have not played any Destiny until then. But I'm gonna tell you, buckle up, sports fans, might be a hot take. There's nothing I see listed here that seems unique to Casper Cole's writing. A celestial object hovering over Earth, flamethrowers being used, and emergency fail-safes. Like, come on, that's all pretty generic sci-fi shit. That's like getting mad that another shooter also has bullets in the game. To me, that seems completely like a non-issue. That doesn't scream, you know, copyright infringement, plagiarism. Now, if you want to talk about the names like War Beasts and Red Legion being exactly the same, I still think that's a moot point because those aren't really unique names either, especially considering Destiny. The name of everything in that game is basically just like a title or like a caveman naming it. The Traveler, the Witness, the Left Shoe, the Accountant, the Bath Master, War Bath, Bath War. Like, that's kind of just the whole naming scheme of that game. So Red Legion and War Beast, that doesn't scream that they stole something from this guy. There is nothing that I've seen listed in this lawsuit that makes me actually think Bungie stole from this guy's fucking WordPress in 2013, 2014 to make the Destiny storyline. But the timing of this lawsuit could not be better for Casper Cole because Bungie themselves can't combat it. They are unable to produce the content that they are being accused of stealing because they don't have access to it themselves. Bungie archived the original code that comprised the Red War and Curse of Osiris campaigns known as legacy builds, according to Tyson Green. However, the Red War and Curse of Osiris legacy builds can no longer run because their outdated code is incompatible with Destiny 2's underlying operational framework, which has evolved considerably since the Red War and Curse of Osiris campaigns were retired. As a result, Bungie cannot feasibly provide the court with the original Destiny 2 game as it existed in 2017, including the accused Red War and Curse of Osiris campaigns in any operable or reviewable form, nor will Bungie be able to produce the accused campaigns in operable or reviewable form if this matter proceeds to formal discovery. So after they put them on the bench, took them out behind the barn and put them down, they no longer can get them back because they've updated the game too much. So they can't actually get the game again. So when they made a motion to dismiss this case, they were basically showing up with their pants down. They had nothing to show. So what they relied on was YouTube videos. But not just YouTube videos, wiki pages as well. Bungie insisted the attached videos are the best possible way for the court to review the accused work. Exhibit B was a 10-hour lore video put together by a YouTuber named My Name is Biff. Banger video, by the way. Exhibit C was a cutscene compilation, again put together by a fan, which is 2 hours and 40 minutes long. But the judge, Susie Morgan, she wasn't playing ball with it. She was not pleased with this maneuver, and it was not sufficient. So she denied this motion to dismiss. The court will not consider the exhibits attached to defendant's motion to dismiss and will not convert the defendant's motion to dismiss to a motion for summary judgment. There has not been sufficient time for discovery, and the attachments are admittedly of third-party origination. Their authenticity has not been established. Basically, Bungie brought piss to a shit fight here, and the judge was not having it. She said, I'm not watching these video essays. You scram with this. Wipe it in your ass and get out of the court with this. Thus, the lawsuit is proceeding. The case is going forward. And I really don't know what Bungie is going to do. They are adamant that it can't be restored, which is pretty mind-boggling to me. I don't know how they wouldn't have like backups of previous builds of the engine or something just for a case like this, to be honest, where you need an older build of the engine or the framework so that way you could restore these things should you ever want to down the line, especially with things like remasters and remakes being so commonplace. It just makes sense to me that you would still have something like that. But I'm just a fucking idiot with a tiny little reptile brain, so maybe I'm on the crack pipe with that take. But what I think I'm 100% in the right on here is that it is ridiculous to be vaulting content in the first place if there is no means ever of getting it back. That is paid content. People paid for that. I paid for that when it came out. And I haven't been able to play it for 5 years and will likely never be able to play it again. Same with everybody else on the fucking planet, it seems. I don't really know what the next move is for Bungie. Maybe they'll start submitting goddamn Let's Plays to the courts or something. Like, here, check this out. Look how much fun they're having. No mention of Casper Cole anywhere. No one's picking up on the similarities. Check it out. Like, I don't know. They're going to have to find a way to actually get the campaign back. But, again, I'm not a lawyer either. I feel like Casper Cole's team would probably then make a case that it's been altered. I'm not trying to go like full anime protagonist here, like it's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Season 2. Next, you're going to say it's been altered. But I feel like that'd be the natural evolution of the argument here in this case. Because if Bungie somehow does produce a reviewable and operable Red War or Curse of Osiris campaign to present to the courts, who's to say they haven't just taken out the offending material of the lawsuit that it points out? Right? Like, they've already said they cannot do it. So if somehow they're able to miraculously do it, would that not raise eyebrows about, like, well, can we trust this? It's fucking fascinating. It's a real brain buster here with the pickle that Bungie finds themselves in. So the YouTube links and everything weren't even considered here because in the initial filing, well, Martineau, I don't exactly know how to say his last name, I'll be honest. That's why I've been calling him Casper Cole. Casper Cole never made any mention of like YouTube or wiki links, so they didn't even consider it. It was deemed like off limits, kind of, I guess. And then Judge Morgan also pointed out that the case is actually pretty complicated, even when Bungie cited previous rulings, saying this case would require a much more complicated side-by-side analysis, even if the court had access to a complete version of Destiny 2. She also noted how the game and the written work aren't even in the same format. Rather than compare a brief movie scene and a copyright for a pinball machine, it appears the defendant is asking the court to compare a collection of short writings to 13 plus hours of third-party originated YouTube videos of Destiny 2 and several third-party originated online Destinypedia pages. Now, if you've got your thinking caps on, to me, there seems to be like a really glaring thing that I haven't seen pointed out in any of the articles. How the fuck is Casper Cole making these arguments in the first place if there is no Red War or Curse of Osiris to compare to anymore anyway? Like, how is he able to reference these things? I'm assuming the only way he'd be able to make these comparisons, since, again, the Red War and Curse of Osiris don't actually exist in the game anymore, is he would be comparing it to YouTube videos and shit. That'd be the only way. While he might not have directly referenced them in the lawsuit, there is no possible way for him to even be making these comparisons in the first place without that. So it is in a weird spot to me, because, again, there is nothing there for Red War or Curse of Osiris. They've already blinked it out. Like, it's gone. So even Casper Cole, when making these arguments, is making them against a fucking ghost. There isn't a Red War or Curse of Osiris campaign that is playable and reviewable that he is making these comparisons to. So it's a bit weird for sure. Now, at the end of the day, do I think Bungie stole his work, like copied his story beats for Destiny? Absolutely not. There is nothing I've seen listed here that screams